There are so many frustrating parts of doing a PhD, and in this video we're going to go over my 5 biggest ones and the tips to get you through at least the worst of it. They could actually be a whole individual video on their own, but let's have a look at the first one, isolation. Isolation is a terrible part of doing a PhD. You're isolated a number of ways. First of all, you may be abroad, you may be in a new city, you may be somewhere where you have no connections and it's really tough. You're isolated because you are doing something no one else is doing, or you have very little overlap with even people in the same group as you doing similar research for a same supervisor. Isolation is a particularly large problem for adults who have moved with families or not to a completely different country. Do you know how hard it is to make friends as an adult? Like when you're younger, kids just like mingle and you get friends, and it's kind of like by accident you end up with them. But as an adult, having friends and creating connections actually involves a lot of work. I've moved about from Australia to Australia from the UK, and then within Australia I've moved from city to city for postdocs, and one thing I found is you have to be on the front foot when it comes to finding friends, and international students find this particularly challenging. Now, what I would recommend you do is that essentially be proactively aggressive and on the front foot when looking for friends. I joined a number of different meetup groups. Skeptics in the Pub was a particularly sort of like fun one, and there I met a friend who I kind of like just forced myself on, really. He says he didn't feel that way, which was good, but for me I was like, here's a friend, I need it. And he opened up this whole world of really nice people to me, and it can be really tough. I've actually been on the other side of it, where I had a network of friends, and I noticed that an international postdoc came over and I didn't do enough to support him in finding connections. He was so friendly, he was so nice, but I don't think I actively didn't want to kind of help him out or be friendly. It was just I had my own stuff going on. So if you are not an international student and you notice that there are plenty of international students in your research group, please reach out to them, because it is so hard to be away from your family, your friends in a new country where there's a completely different culture potentially. So just helping each other, making those connections, and you don't have to be best friends, but you can help each other out. Go somewhere, do something nice, invite your families together. All of that can really help reduce isolation while you're doing a PhD. So yes, isolation is a big thing. And remember that reaching out is a permissionless activity. You do not need permission from anyone to reach out and say, hey, would you like to go here? If you are an adult struggling to make friends, making your own plans and then inviting people in is a fantastic way of kind of building up that network of friends in a new city. And another way is to just reach out, be friendly, and if someone invites you to something, always say yes. This video is brought to you by my newsletter. Go check it out at andrewstaveton.com.au/newsletter. There, when you sign up, you get 5 emails, everything from my favorite academic tools, how to write the perfect abstract, the podcast I've been on, links to my TED Talk, and more. So go sign up, and I'll see you in your inbox soon. Another big frustration for PhD students is that they feel like things are not going fast enough. Now, I like to remind myself that there are essentially a number of different sort of like response curves during a PhD, but overall it is not linear. I've talked about this before on this channel, but you do not put effort in and get results straight away. There is an exponential return on doing a PhD, putting in loads of effort, not seeing results. And that can mean that after 3 years, you're like, why is this not moving fast enough? But you will reach an inflection point if you just keep going little by little. It's important that you monitor monthly progress and quarterly progress rather than daily progress. One thing I found throughout my PhD and postdocs is that some days I would try something, it would fail, or I'd get nothing done because people would put admin tasks right in the middle of the day. And so I would look back at the last month, what I'd done, and compare it to this month to make sure that I'm on the right track. As long as you're measuring the larger time increments and you're seeing sort of that sort of forward progress and momentum, that's good. But daily, it's all over the place. And also, I tended to sort of be pretty kind to myself if there was a meeting. I'd be like, the day is ruined, time to relax. And that's absolutely okay, as long as I made up for it from the rest of the month and I could see that overall progression. Supervisor issues are one of the most frustrating things, because the reason it's frustrating is that it's completely out of your control. You're trying your best to get this supervisor to do something you want them to do, or provide response, or even just respond to your emails. And it's a tricky thing. I've got a number of videos on this channel, but one thing I would say is get used to managing up. You know, after your first year, after you've kind of laid the foundations of that relationship, there is a certain amount of managing you have to do to your supervisor, and you kind of do it subtly in the background. So a number of tips. So first of all, just understand the stresses and the monthly kind of cycle of your supervisor. Do they go away? Do they stay in the lab? Do they turn up earlier some days or not early on some days? And that will help you get an idea of the pressures they're under, the sort of things they're doing, their teaching schedule, their admin schedule, when they're applying for grants, all of that sort of stuff. I actually had dates of where people would be applying for grants in my calendar, so I knew that they would be challenging to get hold of at that point. So yes, making sure you understand what stresses and strains they're going under, and also putting in your calendar, you know, a couple months either side of grant deadlines, because you know they're going to be pretty stressed and busy on that. So once you know that, you can actually manage them much more efficiently. So for example, if you want them to look at a chapter of your thesis, if you want them to look at a paper review, and you know they're busy, don't give it all to them at once. That's what I want to say. You can break it up. You can say, hey, have you got half an hour to look at my abstract or my introduction? They can say yes. But for some reason, even when I was supervising master's students, when they say, here's a massive bulk of stuff, you go, oh no. And you kind of, you estimate how much time it will take you, and you say, I don't have time. Even if it will just take you an hour, you just go, I just don't have time. So breaking it up into small amounts can help. And just knowing what your supervisor needs to get these things done is also another thing that you can do to help improve that sort of frustration with them not responding and doing stuff. You can say, what can I do to help speed this along? Do you want me to break it up? Do you want me to have another read over the draft to make sure I catch any of those annoying errors? All of that sort of stuff can really help. So managing up is a really important thing, in anticipating their needs. And also within your group, you do have to kind of work together to understand what works with your supervisor. Speak to each other and say, hey, this worked for me in the past, splitting up my results and giving it to them, or just barging into their office, which I am quite a fan of, actually. I would just see them and knock. And if it was a little thing, I'd be like, knock, 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 go in. And I'd say, hey, I've got this question. And, some people liked it, some people didn't, but they could always tell me to go away. And saying, our supervisor is busy on these times, but if you catch them just before the end of the day, if you go in and speak to them in this way and say these things, or ask them a question at the beginning of the day as they're walking past your office or visiting, that is a really nice way to kind of collaborate with the people in your group on making your supervisor more efficient overall for all of you. When you're doing a PhD, it is a long period of time that you've got to stay focused on this one thing. And the human brain is not designed for that, I can assure you. They expect linear response. I do this, I get this, move on. The creative aspect can get a little bit draining of a PhD, thinking about the same problem over and over and over again, failing, trying to get through it. And finding that work-life balance is a real frustration. And the work can seem to come first all the time. And look, sometimes you do have to sacrifice a weekend, an afternoon, a nighttime in the lab, like I did throughout my PhD, just to make sure that I was done. And also I would, pop into the lab if I was doing an overnight reaction, a chemical reaction in a fume hood, just to check it on a weekend or something. All of that is just part and parcel of a PhD. But making sure that you actually look at it as a marathon and not a sprint, and whatever you do, try not to give up your hobbies. Hobbies were the one thing that got me through my PhD and my postdocs. I would play samba. I would learn new languages. I would try new things. You know, I enjoyed drinking beer, craft beer, so I'd make sure I'd go to the craft beer festivals. All of that sort of stuff just kept me sane. And I think making time for your hobbies can seem a little bit selfish, but it is not. It is making sure that you are energized and refreshed to carry on. One of my mentors used to say, make sure that you put into your day things that give you energy. For me, that's speaking to people, that's getting out, that's creating content. I make sure I do as much of that as possible throughout the day. If I don't, I start to feel drained. And so hobbies, something that energizes you, getting out in nature, walking, make sure you put plenty of that in your schedule, and make sure that you have at least one full day off where you do something you love, even if it's just sitting down and watching Netflix, eating popcorn and touching yourself. That is absolutely okay. I'm not allowed to say that, am I? Day-to-day motivation throughout a PhD can be really tough. And what I mean is it's hard to be strict on yourself when you sit down and you say, I'm going to do this thing. Now I've got another video all about how not to be productive but do something else instead. And that's talk about allocate some time. Your attention is so very important. It's easy today to be distracted by your phones, by an email, by a notification. My life is silent. I do not have notifications at all on anything. Emails, my phone, text messages, you know, my phone rings but it's on silent. I have a silent technological life, and I really recommend you give it a go, at least on those days off, and it just means that my attention is where I want to put it. So that video is really handy. In terms of day-to-day tricks that I can use to kind of trick myself into being more productive and increasing my motivation is, firstly, I like to say, I'll just do 10 minutes. It's a trick that works on yourself surprisingly well, which is you say, I'll just do 10 minutes of this thing. And before you know it, you've done half an hour. It seems to get you over that little activation energy just to doing work. So I'll sit down, even if I don't feel like it, I'll make sure that I've had plenty to drink, like water-wise, that I've had something to give me a bit of energy, not a sugar rush, but something, you know, because you get a crash, but something like some fruit or something to sustain me, like, you know, a low GI thing, or some nuts or something. And that kind of just helps me sustain that. So I'll say I'll work for 10 minutes, and then if I'm not feeling it after 10 minutes, no dramas, I'll move on. But very often, and most of the time arguably, I'm like, you know what, I'm into this, let's just get it done. Overcoming the activation energy is really easy if you just prepare your workspace. Having a nice tidy workspace doesn't really it makes me more efficient, but looking down here, I'm like, clearly I need to tidy more often. But just making sure that you don't have anything that could get in the way of you doing something is really important. So make sure that the things are charged that need to be charged, that you have all of the information that you need to go forward. And another thing I like to do to help improve my motivation throughout the day is I say, I'll prepare for it. So I'll prepare myself for writing, or I'll prepare an outline for a video, or I'll prepare for a meeting that's coming up with my supervisor. Preparation is key in a load of different things for improving your motivation, getting that ball rolling. And once you've kind of got that ball rolling, it's much easier to keep the momentum up rather than having it stop right in front of you. So yes, preparing, only doing 10 minutes, making sure I remove all of the distractions and reducing the activation energy. So I've got everything I need. I've anticipated what I need to get something done. It's all there in front of me. Boom. That's how you stay motivated. But it's really tough day to day, and sometimes you do just need a break. Last week, I spent an afternoon completely off work because I was like, you know what? I just need this time, and that's absolutely okay. So sometimes motivational tricks can only go so far, and you do just need a little bit of a break. It brought me back. I did something that energized me. Boom. So there we have it. There are the biggest frustrations and the little tips that you can employ to get over them. Now, let me know in the comments what you would add to that. And go check out academiainsider.com, where I have my ebook, The Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, which has been helping people just boost their careers, boost their productivity around actually writing, which can be a really tough thing when you're just trying to squeeze everything else into a PhD schedule and life. Let me know in the comments what you would add to this, and I shall see you in the next video.